There was a time when firing up your motorcycle meant summoning your inner kung fu master and delivering a swift, confident kick. Yes, I'm talking about the Kickstarter, that once essential lever that tested your balance, patience, and physical fitness. Before electric starters took over, riders had no choice but to learn a proper technique. Slowly prime the engine, find the compression stroke, and then commit fully to that downward thrust. While some saw this as a rite of passage, others considered it an unnecessary ritual that often left you sweaty and frustrated on a cold morning. But what made Kickstarters so special wasn't just the skill or the showmanship. It was the total mechanical intimacy you developed with your bike. You actually felt the engine's resistance, making it clear when your machine was ready or needed a little tweak in the carb. The feeling of satisfaction that came from a successful first kickstart was unmatched. Sure, modern starters are convenient, especially when you've just rolled out of bed and your knees aren't what they used to be. Still, there's something lost in not having that direct, leg-driven handshake between rider and engine. It was inconvenient, but it sure felt authentic. Picture a time when your motorcycle's performance wasn't governed by an algorithm, but by your own tinkering with tiny jets and delicate adjustments. Carburetors, those once ubiquitous metal contraptions, were the beating heart of fuel delivery. They mixed air and gasoline in an analog dance, reacting to altitude, temperature, and your right wrist demands with a grace that computers would only later automate. Riders who knew their carbs could get their bikes running like Swiss watches, while the less mechanically inclined had to deal with annoying flat spots, flooding, or the dreaded stale fuel buildup. Carburetors made life more interesting because you could open them up, swap jets, adjust the needle, and genuinely tune your ride for your local conditions. It gave you a sense of empowerment, even if it meant getting your hands dirty more often than you'd like. Sure, modern fuel injection is the picture of reliability and efficiency, providing near-perfect fueling regardless of whether you're climbing the Rockies or cruising Florida's flatlands. Yet something about that direct control, about the subtle hiss as you gently crack the throttle, is missing. Carburetors could be finicky, but that was part of their charm, now relegated to the dusty corners of memory. Once upon a time, you didn't need a track-ready race bike to experience razor-sharp throttle response and exhilarating power bands. Two-stroke street bikes delivered that excitement in a lightweight, no-nonsense package. Their engines were simpler in construction, often lighter, and capable of blistering performance for their displacement. The smell of burning oil and the sight of blue smoke trailing behind might have been an acquired taste, but it was all part of an experience unique to these wild little machines. Back in the day, manufacturers cranked out affordable two-stroke twins and singles that punched well above their weight, delighting younger riders and cost-conscious enthusiasts. You could wring out the throttle and get a grin-inducing rush of power that felt raw and alive. Of course, their Achilles heel came in the form of environmental impact. The oil burned alongside the fuel resulted in higher emissions, which modern regulations simply wouldn't tolerate. Ultimately, government mandates forced these bikes into niche status or off-road only machines. In hindsight, two-stroke street bikes were uncomplicated thrills. They offered ferocious acceleration in a mechanical symphony that just doesn't exist in today's sterile, efficient world. They were dirty and loud, but that's what made them unforgettable. Next, enclosed final drive chains. Imagine a world where your motorcycle's drive chain never got crusted with grit or slathered in road grime. Enclosed chains were a dream come true for riders who hated the constant maintenance routine of cleaning and lubricating a naked chain. These protective housings ensured the chain and sprockets enjoyed a cleaner, more controlled environment, leading to reduced wear and an extended service life. For a while, some manufacturers offered fully or partially enclosed drive systems that promised more riding, less wrenching. There was a certain elegance to these contraptions. Not only did they keep your rear wheel area neat, they saved you from flinging greasy chain lube onto your pants or, worse yet, onto your date's new boots. But like many clever concepts, enclosed chains came with trade-offs. Adding extra covers and seals could increase weight and complexity while making quick roadside repairs a chore. Eventually, cost-cutting and the rise of improved chain materials made fully enclosed units rare. Designers and riders alike decided that a bit of chain maintenance was a small price to pay for simplicity and weight reduction. Still, it's hard not to wonder if, in an era of high-tech everything, a tidy, low-maintenance chain enclosure might be worth revisiting. Number 5. Manual ignition advanced controls. Long before microchips calibrated your engine's timing with microscopic precision, there was a lever on the handlebars that let you control when the spark fired. Adjusting ignition timing by hand might sound like a chore, but it gave riders a thrilling sense of mastery. Tweaking the spark advance could help a stubborn engine start on a frosty morning or squeeze a little more pep out of your machine at speed. It was a direct conversation between you and the engine, one that demanded skill and understanding of the machine's mood. Of course, the downside was that you had one more job to do while riding, and if you forgot to delay the timing at low speeds or during startup, you risked a nasty kickback from the engine. Modern electronic ignition systems have made all this obsolete by constantly optimizing timing for conditions. It's objectively better, but it also means today's riders rarely understand how spark timing affects performance. Back then, you learned these nuances firsthand. This old-school feature embodied the idea that riding wasn't just twisting a throttle. It was about finesse, awareness, and a genuine mechanical partnership between human and machine, now faded into the annals of motorcycling history. Before we move on to the next one in the list, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you're enjoying this content so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks to all of you who do. Number 6. Drum brakes. Before disc brakes became the universal norm, motorcycles often relied on drum brakes, a technology that feels ancient now. These mechanical marvels were encased units that slowed the wheel's rotation by pressing curved shoes against the inside of a metal drum. While they lacked the outright stopping force of modern discs, drum brakes had a distinctive feel. They required careful setup to keep the brake shoes properly adjusted, and after spirited riding down a long mountain pass, you might find your braking power fading as heat built up inside the drum. But there was an undeniable charm to drum brakes. They were often quieter, and their simplicity appealed to old-school wrenchers. Mastering the art of smoothly modulating a drum brake offered a subtle kind of rider satisfaction. They integrated neatly into the wheel and sometimes even contributed to a bike's distinctive, vintage style. Ultimately, as motorcycles grew faster, heavier, and more performance-driven, drums couldn't keep up. Modern disc brakes deliver superior power, consistency, and reliability, leaving drum brakes to the realm of classic restorations and museum pieces. Still, remembering the gentle hum of a drum brake slowing you down can evoke a nostalgic sense of simpler times. There was a time when practically every standard motorcycle rolled off the line with a sturdy center stand. This unassuming piece of hardware might not have been flashy, but it made routine tasks like checking the oil, lubing the chain, or even just parking on uneven ground infinitely more convenient. A center stand could transform a quick roadside chain adjustment from a wrestling match into a civilized, upright operation, making riders feel like they had their own portable shop stand wherever they went. Yet over the years, center stands started to vanish, especially from sportier and lighter models. Weight reduction, styling preferences, and cost-cutting measures gradually pushed this useful feature to optional or aftermarket territory. Riders who appreciate the convenience might find themselves shelling out extra cash just to get back that simple convenience their grandparents took for granted. Some argue that the disappearance of center stands has made basic DIY maintenance more challenging for the average rider. Others say that the sleek lines and lower weight of modern bikes are worth the trade. Whatever your stance, it's hard to deny that a once common, incredibly useful piece of kit slipped quietly into the forgotten archives of motorcycle design. Next, we have tank-mounted instrument clusters. In decades past, some motorcycles placed their speedometers, tachometers, and other gauges right on top of the gas tank rather than perched up near the handlebars. It might sound peculiar, but this setup gave certain bikes a unique look and feel. Glancing down at your fuel tank to check your speed or watch your revs climb offered a different kind of interaction with the machine. It was less about a quick flick of the eyes and more about a deliberate act of consulting your bike's vitals. The tank-mounted gauges certainly had style, evoking a certain cruiser or classic vibe. Some riders liked the cleaner handlebar area, while others appreciated the old-school aesthetic. Still, there were obvious downsides. Taking your eyes further off the road to check your speed wasn't exactly improving safety. In an age before heads-up displays and smartphone integration, this placement might have felt more classy than practical. Over time, designers realized that keeping critical information in a rider's immediate line of sight was a no-brainer, and these tank-top clusters faded from widespread use. They remain a curiosity, a reminder of a more experimental era in motorcycle design, when style sometimes trumped ergonomics. Long before tubeless tires became the norm, motorcycles rolled on wheels lined with inner tubes. Changing a tire back then could be an affair involving tire irons, soapy water, and a fair bit of cursing. Punctures often meant pulling over, removing the wheel, and wrestling the tire off to patch or replace the tube. This process could turn a lazy Sunday ride into an impromptu roadside workshop, testing a rider's patience and skills. Yet the simplicity of this setup had its virtues. Tube tires, especially on wire-spoke wheels, offered flexibility, and plus, if you knew what you were doing, a tube repair could be accomplished with basic tools and know-how, making you feel like a self-sufficient traveler. Modern tubeless systems, with their airtight rims and easy plug repairs, are undeniably more convenient and safer at high speeds. They eliminate the violent, immediate deflation that sometimes came with tube blowouts. While tube tires may still have a foothold in dirt bikes and certain retro-style machines, the era of tubes as a universal standard has slipped away. In the age before every motorcyclist carried a smartphone and could summon help with a tap, bikes often came with a small factory toolkit tucked somewhere under the seat. This humble collection of wrenches, screwdrivers, and spark plug sockets might have been basic and sometimes laughably cheap, but it was a crucial lifeline if something went amiss on a lonely stretch of road. Just knowing it was there offered peace of mind, and it often encouraged riders to learn the basics of maintenance and roadside repairs. The built-in toolkit symbolized a belief that a rider and machine formed a partnership. You weren't just passively operating a device. You were prepared to care for it if need be. Sure, the tools were never top-notch quality and sometimes didn't fit quite right, but riders adapted. Over time, manufacturers phased out these toolkits as owners started carrying their own sets or relying on widespread roadside assistance programs. In today's world, many modern bikes have barely enough room under the seat for your registration papers, let alone a toolkit. That tiny toolbox was a small yet significant reminder that riders used to accept responsibility for their own machines in more hands-on ways. Back in a time before computers managed electronic suspension, some bikes offered a hydraulic knob or lever you could use to adjust preload on the shock or even fine-tune damping while out on the open road. Riders could stiffen things up for aggressive cornering or soften the suspension for a more comfortable cruise, all without reaching for special tools. This kind of user-friendly engineering made suspension tuning feel accessible and immediate, giving you a better connection to how your bike handled different surfaces. You didn't need a smartphone app or a dealership technician to make your suspension more plush after hitting a patch of rough asphalt. Instead, a twist here or a push there, and you were good to go. The downfall came as more advanced, electronically controlled systems emerged, offering near-instant adjustments guided by sensors, microchips, and algorithms. While undeniably more sophisticated and precise, these setups might leave the everyday rider more detached from the machine's mechanical heart. The hydraulic adjusters were a sweet spot between old-fashioned wrenches and high-tech wizardry. They represented a time when riders had meaningful control, yet didn't need a computer science degree to achieve a perfectly balanced ride. Modern bikes tend to rely on discrete indicator lights and subtle dashboard icons to remind you that your turn signal's still blinking. However, it wasn't always this way. Many older motorcycles included an audible clicking sound, much like old cars, to alert riders that their blinker was still on. As funny as it sounds, this little audio cue served an important function in an era without self-canceling signals. If you were chatting with a buddy at a stoplight or daydreaming as you rode along a scenic route, that soft click-click-click was a friendly nudge to remember to switch your signals off. But in time, these audible reminders were deemed unnecessary, noisy, or just plain annoying. As aesthetics and style took precedence, subtlety became the order of the day. Now, it's not unusual to see a fellow rider cruising down the highway with their left blinker unknowingly flashing for miles. Is that really better? We might laugh at the idea of wanting a sound that draws attention to a turn signal, but it was a simple and effective solution. Sometimes losing these small conveniences makes us realize their quiet brilliance. The clicker was practical, helpful, and arguably safer than today's silent approach. At one time, heel-toe shifters weren't confined to cruiser or touring bikes. You could find them on various street-oriented motorcycles, giving riders a more versatile and comfortable shifting method. Instead of always hooking your toe under the lever to upshift, you could simply press down on the heel pedal, which made for cleaner, more deliberate gear changes. For riders who wore heavier boots or who struggled with traditional shift levers, the heel-toe design offered a friendlier interface. There was something distinctly satisfying about tapping your heel to engage the next gear. It reduced the strain on your ankle and contributed to a more relaxed riding experience. You felt as though the bike's ergonomics were tailored to human anatomy, rather than forcing riders to adapt to the machine. Despite these advantages, the market moved on, perhaps as manufacturers sought to standardize controls or focus on sporty aesthetics over comfort. In a world where so many other features have been streamlined or replaced by high-tech solutions, the heel-toe shifter's demise might seem minor, but those who remember using it know that it was a small, human-centric innovation that made riding just a bit friendlier and more intuitive. That's our trip down memory lane. Maybe some of these old features weren't perfect, but they had character, making riding feel more personal, even intimate. They encouraged us to know our bikes, wrench our own repairs, and develop unique riding techniques. While modern motorcycles are objectively better in so many ways, it's worth remembering what we've lost. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments which feature you wish would make a comeback. Until next time, keep the shiny side up and the memory of these old wonders alive. Ride safe, everyone.